Good afternoon, everyone. I'm your host, Brian Buckmire, the Law and Crime Trial Network. Now, I am joined with Roger P. Foley today, criminal defense attorney. Roger, how you doing?
Hey, Brian, how are you today?
Good, good. As we are here waiting for multiple verdicts to drop, let's talk about the Delgado case. All the information has been brought forward. Prosecution has brought witnesses to testify. The defense's case has rested. As we're waiting for a verdict, well, first, I guess, as a case comes to an end and you wait for the verdict, what are we to expect to happen in the next steps after everyone's rested?
Well, everyone's rested. The jury's going to go in the back room, and someone's going to be elected as foreman. Everyone's going to vote, and that foreman is going to walk around the room and say, "What do you think? What do you think? And what do you think?" And if everyone says not guilty, not guilty, not guilty, then not guilty. If everyone goes guilty, 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 well, then we'll be back pretty quick. The question becomes whether they waver and vacillate, and that's part of the jury instructions. You know, if you think, well, she's probably guilty, but I don't know, that's where that reasonable doubt comes in, and that's where the jurors start to argue their individual points about what they think so they can collaborate to come to a unanimous decision.
Now, I know with some of the cases, especially the Winslow case that I think is going to be back on in a couple hours, we've been hearing readbacks of, can we listen to this testimony? Can we listen to that? What are we to glean out of that? I know a lot of defense attorneys, we say it's kind of like reading tea leaves. What are they thinking? Where are we going? Would you be expecting a lot of readbacks here? Or do you think that the Delgado case was pretty straightforward and we should be getting a verdict soon?
You know, there's a lot of video. Obviously, her interaction with the police officer is all video, as you just queued up there. There's always jurors that either they don't take the notes properly or there's just so much information, right? You got to think that they've been doing this over the last several days. There's a lot of information, right? Both sides, the attorneys have had months, years, right, to go over all the evidence. They're having to do it in a very short amount of time. So sometimes there needs to be a readback. They go, hey, well, I think he said this, or, oh, I think she said that. So there might be some readbacks.
Yeah. Now, they don't have the benefit of watching some of the videos as their viewers do, but let's look at some of the information and some of the evidence that came in that they might be considering as they decide this verdict. So just as we were talking about the Delgado case, we got a verdict. The jury had only had the case for 20 minutes, and I think they might have had Roger P. Foley in their ear as they just walk in and they kind of ask around, what do you think? We're going to wait until we can get a feed from inside the court so we can see what the verdict is. But Roger, at least for me, this is probably the scariest thing for a defense attorney. They're not asking for readbacks. They're not asking for questions. They're saying we have a verdict. What do you anticipate the verdict to be?
I got to say, Brian, I think that we're going to get a guilty plea here. You know, I noticed that there were a lot of lacks of objections made by defense counsel. Police officers were allowed to comment on her testimony, which I don't think is proper. And I think that when they looked at everything, it just, when you look at it, she looks guilty. You know, without a stronger defense, without some proper objections, without contrast in the evidence and showing those issues, I think you're going to get a guilty plea, and rightfully so. But I just think that I saw a lot of things from the defense table that we all can work on our objections, right? And I think a lot of things came in, commentary on testimony that shouldn't have.
Yeah, and this case seemed pretty strong for the prosecution from the get-go, both in the witnesses that were able to testify against Ms. Delgado and also the streamlinedness of this case. I mean, this was a pretty quick case. We anticipated this might last for a week or so, or maybe a little bit longer, but this was in and out. It seems like the jury is kind of following suit with the prosecution as well.
You can only expect the jury to follow what they hear. There wasn't much of a defense, put on from there's only one witness, right? So there was a cross-examination of the witnesses, the getaway driver being the biggest on the cross-examination, but all roads sort of lean to the guilty. So I'm expecting a guilty, and whether she did it or not, I don't know. But obviously, what we've heard, it seems to align with a proper decision if a guilty verdict is exactly what comes.
Yeah, like we said, 20 minutes is how long they had it. And I know for some people, 20 minutes can be a long time, but if you look at some of the other cases we're following, the Winslow case, the Merritt case, those are going on for days and hours. So sometimes I think, Roger, you're absolutely right. You kind of get the vibe or the feeling that's going on in the court. And when you get a quick verdict like that, I think everyone kind of knows what's coming down. And just to remind everyone, if she is convicted, it's a mandatory life without parole. There were no lesser includeds given to the jury to consider. It's only the top count, so it's all or nothing really for Ms. Delgado. With no parole,
That's absolutely correct,
seems
Brian.
like it's it.
Yeah, she because of that, the extradition back from Mexico, Mexico wouldn't even extradite her if the state didn't agree to not execute her if she was found guilty. Obviously, fleeing to Mexico, evidence of guilt, knowing the driver of the vehicle, evidence of possible guilt, borrowing the vehicle, all of the things that she put out, not a very complicated murder and easy for a jury to follow, and the likelihood is that she is guilty. Whether it's beyond and to exclusion of a reasonable doubt, that's another thing. But when you look at all the evidence, Brian, there's a high likelihood of guilt here.
Yeah, we had talked about this yesterday and you touched on it. The witnesses, none of them interested witnesses, all close friends, some like quasi-family members to her, and they all pretty credible. And to your point, Roger, it seems pretty straightforward. It doesn't seem like there's much here for the jury to consider.
Yeah, obviously she, her defense team and her, she maintained her innocence throughout, and everyone is entitled to a jury trial and to have their day in court. And she's had her last 4 days in court, and we're going to find out moments away. And I'm sure you're excited to know, just like I am, and all the viewers are, did they go back and go, hey, what do you think? Guilty, 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 guilty. And if that's what happens in 20 minutes. What else could you talk about?
Yeah,
someone had to use the restroom for 5 minutes, right?
Yeah, I can't imagine that anyone gave their opinion, anyone asked for any clarification on anything from each other. I know typically you always think there's one holdout, there's one person who's really wants to look through all the charges. I mean, in 20 minutes, Roger, the only thing I think I can imagine is, hey, let's read the charges. Let's read the elements or the portions of the charges, and let's just check every box. In 20 minutes, I can't imagine there was any really waiver from anyone in the jury. But also, Roger, I'll ask this question. Is it not a win in of itself just to get the death penalty off the table? I mean, a lot of people, defense attorneys just aim for that.
It is huge. I mean, that was his beginning, his opening argument. I'm sorry, I'm confusing. I don't want to confuse. The not getting the death penalty is huge. Remember, just because of the extradition, Mexico wouldn't allow the extradition if the death penalty was on the table. Just that in itself is huge, because remember, the shooter, right? And if she is an accomplice and she orchestrated all of this, she should be getting the death penalty, right? What's good for the goose is good for the gander. The shooter got it, and if she directed him to do this, she should be getting the death penalty. But based on a technicality, based on extradition treaties between the two countries, even if she's found guilty, she'll do life in prison, and the death penalty will be off the table.
Yeah, just to remind you, the shooter was Christopher Love, who was a hired hitman, and Love was sentenced to death in October 2018. The other co-defendant, which was Crystal Cortez, who was the getaway driver, I believe that with the agreement to plea deal to testify at Love's and Delgado's trial, Crystal Cortez got 35 years in prison. So everyone got some sort of penalty in this. Obviously, Love got the worst. And to your point, Roger, yeah, she got a great deal. And so I guess maybe she walks away somewhat winning in this all, considering what she might have actually done and what the jury comes back with. I mean, we don't know yet. Maybe she's not guilty. Maybe we're all assuming the worst.
And that's very true, Brian. We all sit here, and exactly what defense counsel said. We all have a gut instinct. And when you hear this evidence, right, and you see the way the characters line up, right, my inclination is guilty. Now, did I like everything the way it was orchestrated by the police and by the state? No. But that doesn't take away from the facts. That the facts got out. Should have there been a lot more objections? Should have there been maybe some more motions in limine? Probably. Should that video should have been altered slightly so the jury didn't see all the comments that were inappropriately made? Maybe, but maybe that was also defense counsel's strategy. And if that was their strategy, then we're going to find out.
All right, we're looking right now inside the courtroom. Delgado has just walked in. Her attorney is there. We're waiting. This is exciting, guys. Like 20 minutes and we've got a verdict. I mean, I'm not sure about you, Roger. My record so far is 30 minutes, and I got a full acquittal on a gun case. I've never seen a 20-minute verdict. I'm sure the prosecution is giddy and butterflies, and maybe the defense attorney is hoping for the best. But have you ever seen something come down as quickly as this? Why there be an acquittal or a guilty verdict?
On a death, on a murder case, it doesn't exist. And again, you got to look at these facts. She knew she borrowed the Jeep from the friend, and then he sees it. He gets a phone call and checks it out, and then has a conversation. Yeah. I mean, that the defense table, the defendant, they're sweating right now. There's trickles of sweat coming down the side of their neck and their back, because 20 minutes is a scary thing, and they come back guilty. She's in prison for the rest of her life.
I mean, I can only imagine what happens at the sentencing. If you're telling me that you're getting found guilty after 20 minutes, the sentencing is going to be what? Half of that? Maybe? I mean, if they're that quick to come back with where she's guilty, what can we expect of the verdict? I mean, the sentencing?
I don't know the law in Texas. Sometimes when that's the only option that they have, they might go right to sentencing, like we saw a few weeks ago in one of the other cases that we were discussing. Yeah, I mean, how long is sentencing? Obviously, we've already heard the hard facts of a young lady, a dentist, who dated a gentleman, and what we're known to us right now is that she was killed. She was executed because this woman was jealous, and it was an ex-girlfriend, and she orchestrated everything. That's all we have. I can't imagine the judge delaying sentencing too much.
Yeah, and then how much of this is, so I get it. Christopher Love, sorry, they're grown-ups. They know right from wrong. They know what they should have done. But here you have Brenda Delgado, who is the puppeteer, the puppet master of this all, and she didn't just kill one person, being Kendra Hatcher. She kind of technically also killed Christopher Love by roping him into this. I mean, she's got 2 lives on her hands and a 35-year sentence for Crystal Cortez. I mean, I see them throwing the book at her.
Absolutely. I can't, you're not going to get less than 35 years. I don't know how, I think she's in her early 20s. I expect life in prison without parole if the jury does indeed, find her guilty.
Yeah. Do you think the judge is going to take that in consideration? So the jury's actually walking in now. I'm hoping that my question is the judge going to take that into consideration, that there's other people who participated in this, someone who actually pulled the trigger, someone who drove away, and another judge gave one 35 years, another judge gave this person the death penalty. The judge knows they can't give the death penalty, that's off the table. Is the judge considering the sentence of the other 2 when they make the decision here?
Absolutely, Brian, and I think that I wouldn't be surprised if the judge mentions that there's 3 lives, that there's 4 families here involved, and the sentence that it caused to all of the families and all the repercussions of this. She solicited 2 people to commit a murder.
We're actually going right to court right now. There you have it, Roger. Just as you said, she's given life without the possibility of parole. And we've heard a number of statements, some very pointed, some very angry, understandably, as they gave their final words to Brenda Delgado. What do you have to say as the family members and witnesses testified afterwards?
Brian, it's so important that our criminal justice system allows families of victims to be heard. When I have chills, I even started to tear up, to understand the pain that a mother, a father, a sister, a brother, family, and friends have when.
And Roger, actually, I think the defense attorney, I'm sorry to cut you off, I think the defense attorney is actually speaking to the judge right now. Let's take a listen to what she has to say. sorry to cut you off there, but it appears there that the defense attorney was making a record that he had made an objection in the past as to an issue being somewhat confusing, that they would have to decide whether or not this was a robbery gone wrong or intentional murder. It sometimes seems a little too late, but Roger, you had the perfect answer for that. Why is he getting up and saying that now?
Well, he's making a record for appeal. You know, he as the defense counsel has a job, and that job is to point out inconsistencies and to make proper objections. If he fails to make the objection on the record, if it's on sidebar, if it's not recorded, an appellate court cannot review it. So it's super important that he renews objections, even though objection had already been overruled by the judge had decided on it. Now what he does is what defense counsel does is in the appellate process, they look at all of those things and make sure that he made a clear record, because every issue that he thinks that his client was wronged on, the appellate court will review for mistakes to see if the judge did it properly or not.
So now this seems to be a situation where he's lost the war, but he's looking at he's lost the battle, sorry, but he's looking at the war, because yes, you're right, this will continue long past after she's been sentenced and been sitting in jail. Do you see any issues that might come up on appeal? I mean, I know that they have to rise to a level beyond harmless error, but I don't see anything here.
I don't either. And I haven't watched every minute, every second of the trial, but I've watched the vast majority of it. There's mistakes, but are they mistakes that fall to the point of having to have a retrial? I don't see it. All the facts that we had, there really wasn't a lot of defense to it. There's two people. They were solicited by this woman, Brenda Delgado, and they collaborated with a scheme to follow her and take her out of the picture, to murder her. Now, she's saying that, you know, maybe there was a robbery and that was part of his objection. Well, she thought it was going to be a robbery, or maybe she didn't think it was going to be a robbery. But if she didn't know anything about it, it sort of defeats the whole purpose of the defense. I don't see, I mean, there's always something to appeal, but whether or not the District Court of Appeals and the Texas Supreme Court reverses, first thing our audience should know, less than 5% of appeals are actually successful, right? That's where you got to start the premise at. So yes, you have to go through it, but she's going to be in prison for the rest of her life.
And just so our viewers know that we're talking about, when we talk about harmless error, it's a doctrine or a theory that comes all the way from the Supreme Court and it goes to state statutes and state legislature that basically says, was there enough of an error, or was the error large enough that it would truly change the outcome of the case? So if we're saying, hey, they were given information that it was a robbery gone wrong, but also information that was premeditated, and then the appellate court comes back and says, you know what, that might have been an error, but it's not one that would have changed the ultimate outcome. And if it's not one that would have changed the ultimate outcome, which I agree with you, Roger, it appears that this sentence will remain the same. But as defense attorneys, we know we got to take every whack at the tree that we can, hoping that that large redwood might fall down in our favor. But we got to see.
Yeah, you have to. I mean, it's, you know, people have asked me over the years, Brian, of how do you do criminal defense? And, oh, you must encounter such bad people. And we do, right? All defense attorneys, we have good clients, we have bad clients, we have clients that are super guilty. But even the ones that come to us and tell us that they're guilty, we have to go through the work. You know why? Because there are those times that truly innocent person, wrong time, wrong place, misidentification, come into that office. And because you've represented so many people that are in fact are guilty, you've had the repetitions, like in football, you've had the reps, so you can truly defend the innocent person. And folks, there are innocent people in our system that are found guilty. I'm not saying that this is one of them. Please don't misconstrue what I'm saying. But as a defense attorney, our job is to help people get to the bottom of it. So it's important that even if you were to think your client was guilty, because sometimes you do, but you have to do everything you possibly can, because there will be a day, I guarantee, if you're a defense attorney, that an innocent person will be charged with a crime and they need your help and they need your voice. And it's important that you don't just go blah, 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 that you've had experience to be able to fight the fight.
Roger, I could not have said any better, so I'm not going to try. So we'll be back right after this break.